Hello, Christine. Thank you so much for joining She Leads today. I'm very excited to have you on the show and just to learn from you. So thank you for joining.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So you are the owner of ArloSoul Visualize Innovation. ArloSoul is a business strategy and consulting firm that inspires growth through visual strategies. So really using visual facilitation and really incorporating the visual aspect of storytelling into these businesses and really to incorporate growth into it. So I'm really excited to hear about that more. You're also the author of Picture Your Business Strategy, Transform Decisions with the Power of Visuals. So really a go-to resource for how to plan and execute great business plans. And from a general sense, you have 20 plus years of experience in strategy consulting, business planning, and more. So I'm really just excited to hear about your work and how you came to be such a powerful force in strategic planning and visualization and storytelling. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, I want to start off with take me back to when you were about my age, so 22 years old, coming out of Lewis and Clark College, I believe, and getting a degree at Lewis and Clark. At this point, what did you imagine your life? What did you want to be? What questions were you asking yourself to really go to that next step into the real world?
I think I didn't have a good definition of who I wanted to be. And I think actually that played to my advantage. So in addition to the work that I did, in college, I spent a lot of time outside of college cooking professionally. So I've always had this sort of business analytical plus highly creative side to me. And even going back to high school, that showed up the same way. So, I was about graduating from college. I knew I could cook and I could take that with me anywhere, but I really didn't, outside of an English degree, I really didn't have a specific plan about what I was going to do. And I would also say the economy was real crap in 1985. So I left Portland and came back to Denver, Colorado, found a marketing. I worked part-time for a restaurant and an architectural bookstore doing marketing, and then also part-time at REI. So this sort of hopping and this sort of making things fit has really been part of my whole trajectory. Yeah. So where I had colleagues that had a clear vision, like I'm going to go work for MCI WorldCom, I'm going to go work for Accenture, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So did you have people in your life, mentors or anyone almost guiding you and kind of leading you in some directions? Or was it just like exploration and being like, okay, here's an opportunity, I'm going to jump on it?
I will say that I left Colorado and lived in Virginia for a while. And when I was living in Virginia, I had a couple of really profound experiences, I think, that had a big impact later on my work.
Yeah.
The first one is that I worked as like office and back-end support to a peach and apple packing plant. So I met a lot of women who didn't have a high school education and were more concerned about holding on to their SNAP benefits than they were about employment. So the reason that became so like a real powerful force in the work that like how I got to where I am now is that I think especially for women, that is not really being able to own your future and being able to work forward. So being really tethered to a system that doesn't serve you. And I remember thinking, that's nice that Virginia Woolf wanted a room of her own, but so many women can't afford it.
Yeah.
Like they just can't do that. So that really, I was like, wow, so I'm going to have to get kind of gritty and roll my sleeves up and actually, nothing's going to be handed to me.
Yeah.
And I saw that firsthand. I think the other thing is I worked for a medical publishing company and, during that same time, more full-time employment and also a restaurant when I was in Virginia. And I had a lot of mentors. I didn't realize it at the time, but actually who were just really supporting me and propelling me to create opportunities for myself so that I could show up in the fullest version of myself.
Yeah.
And so it was really during that time that it was very unsettling because I didn't have a path, but very empowering at the same time to know that I was really in charge. And so I could pretty much do whatever I wanted, but that it was going to be a lot of work.
Yeah. So I feel like your experience is like even more tangible for what we're going through right now. Like as a graduate right now, the economy is obviously not great. And I feel like a lot of people, they're getting laid off, or the job that they had planned is now no longer. So almost what I feel like you mentioned how there wasn't a direct path, and while you did feel empowered at times, you likely felt lost and you really didn't know what will bring. How did you kind of get through this time, or like what mindset did you have for yourself to be like, okay, it'll be okay and I'll find something?
So one of the things at the beginning of COVID-19 in March, the CEO of Bunker Labs, so I volunteer for an organization called Bunker Labs, he interviewed me. And he said, what are you going to keep doing in your business to survive? And it directly comes from when I was 22 to like 25. You need a lot of hustles. Like you can't just have one thing.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're doing this podcast or video blog, the fact that I have several different aspects of my business that I'm hustling right now means that one or two of them are sticking, and then we're just following that path. So I would say for people who are in their 20s just coming out of college, don't get attached to one thing. And really what might be the right thing for you is just right over here, like your peripheral vision. You can't see it. And this is actually where drawing really comes into it. It's like if you can draw the essence of what you're thinking, draw some of the ideas that you have, you start seeing things. The brain starts processing information in patterns and relationships versus hierarchy. And so that, having a side hustle, and then when you are confused, actually sitting down with a piece of paper and trying to draw what you're thinking is something really smart that you should do now.
Interesting. Okay, so great segue. I want to get into that. So first, when did you learn the power of drawing and visualizing it rather than like words and data and numbers and all of that? When did you discover that?
Well, there were 2 points in my life. The first one was when I was in a leadership role running a nonprofit, the Keystone Science School. It's really through that leadership journey I understood that I'm a strategist. Like that, first and foremost, if you take the Gallup Strengths Finder, my number one strength is strategic thinking. And so as a leader, I'm uncovering that and understanding why I think the way I think and how I organize information. That was hugely powerful. And then I was in graduate school at Daniels College of Business at the University of Denver. And right at that same time, it coincided with 9/11. And I met two people who actually had a visual business. And I had never seen anything like this. And I thought, wow, this is so fun. This is super creative. And done strategically, I think it could really help people. Like that's how my first orientation was. And so I agreed with those two women to actually do their business plan as part of my MBA program if they could teach me how to draw.
Wow.
So that's how it started.
Amazing. So you almost saw these people doing it and being in an effective way. You were like, why don't I combine my strategy mindset with visuals and really take it off from there? That's awesome. So,
yeah, exactly.
So now walk me through after your MBA, was there always a point where you're like, this could be something that I consult a lot of other businesses to incorporate as well? Or when did you find the value in it and something that you wanted to pursue kind of as a career?
Yeah, I think that coming out of my MBA and learning through a couple of people I had a business with for a while, learning in conjunction with them, and also the impact that 9/11 had on the economy, which also is very consistent with what we're experiencing right now.
Right.
I realized that strategy and some of the hardcore business processes and approaches like gap analysis and environmental scan, some of these like traditional business methodologies could be easily visualized, but the visual itself had to be relevant to where a business was. So coming out of 9/11, a visual was perceived as a thing that was nice to have, not have to have.
Yeah.
And I became super passionate about working with businesses to help them understand how essential a visual was. So it went from nice to have to
I can't think another way.
Wow.
Like I can't really think about my business and how I'm going to grow my business without a visual. And I became very, very passionate. I was, young in my thinking and as a consultant, so I definitely made some mistakes.
Yeah.
But I think actually that just fortified my belief that visuals are absolutely essential, and especially seeing the impact now with the global pandemic, the impact that we experienced in 2008, and then even going back to 9/11, how global our economy has become. Visuals are a perfect way to get people on the same page.
You don't have to speak the same language to actually see a little person holding a money sign, to say, wow, that person is generating value, for example.
Yes. So, okay, so many questions I can ask. I love this. So, in this early stage, when you're going to business and pitching it, were there challenges? Were people being like, yes, this is great, but this is still just like a added bonus. It's not a must-have, as you mentioned.
Oh yeah, I mean, so one of the first mechanisms we use to try and pitch business, which I think is fairly common even now, is like, hey, let us do a pro bono or a demo session. And what we found in that in that approach was that we were giving away people's strategy. So what happened is we sit down with like yourself, Carly, and we would say, okay, tell us about some of your business challenges. And at the end of 90 minutes, that person was like, hey, can I have that picture? Yeah, you just solved my business problem. I don't have to hire you. We were getting a lot of meetings, but we weren't converting that into work. So we had to rethink, how we did that business approach. And the other thing was actually going back and talking to a lot of our customers about why did you choose us and did you choose the visual? And so really, even before design thinking, using a design thinking approach where the customer is at the center, the users are at the center of the experience, understanding what it was about some customers that the visual really resonated, and with other customers that it was seen as something superfluous or something that they really didn't need.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
Definitely. And so did you ever just, before we get into like the details of how effective it is, did you ever doubt what you got into and being like, okay, this is probably not sustainable, I need to choose another path? Or were there ever just like slumps in the road you were just like had to be mentally strong?
There are always slumps in the road. Like it hasn't been like this straight, nice arrow, that's like, yes, even though my business is, even in spite of COVID, is doing well.
Right.
There's always slumps. And I think that actually, pairing up with an engagement in an organization that didn't really get the visual component and might have been looking for something different. I spent some time actually a couple years ago going back to those clients and having really honest conversations about what didn't work for you as part of this process. So that required a lot of humility to actually say to myself and the people that I worked with, hey, we're going to go back to this project and these people where it didn't work. And we're going to actually ask them for some very candid feedback about what was the process like. And I have to say that when you do that, I encourage everybody to get into those deep conversations. First of all, those customers become the greatest referrals. They become the greatest mechanism because they understand on their end what they didn't do to succeed. So in the same way that we got a lot smarter about, okay, so that wasn't right. This wasn't a good fit for this reason. We're going to pivot and do this.
Yeah.
And so I think when there are those slumps, don't be afraid to actually go to the people that you're working with and saying, how can we make this better?
I love that. I think there's so many valuable tools just in doing that. Not only are you gaining insight for pivoting and going better, but it also just shows you as a company that you care about your customers and you want to do better and you're there, like you want to take that action to learn and really help the next customer. And as you said, like that's what the referral will come from. So I think that's really important. So my one question that I have is when you're incorporating these visual tools, and I think one challenge that I see is these business leaders and these companies, they almost don't have the confidence to draw. Like for me, I don't necessarily view myself as this artistic person. And like, yes, it could be simple drawings, but I would still prefer someone else to do it, for instance. So do you run into that? Do you run into that where you almost have to say you don't have to be artistic and it's not about that and it's rather this is purely just great for your business? Or how do you navigate that?
So when I was writing my book, I did a lot of research about this on like what kind of things do you have to change in your brain to be able to kind of open yourself up. Yeah. And then I've had a lot of experience. So I teach classes and how to do this. And we've had several business leaders come to those classes thinking, oh my gosh, you make it look so easy. Yeah. And after 2 or 3 days, they their reaction is just sort of like, now I understand why people hire somebody like you. So here's a couple things that we know is that we know that the human brain from ages 0 to 3 is on hyperactive. It's supercharged to make meaning, right? And the way that we do that as really young people is we look at color and shapes. And so visual elements are deeply wired into how humans learn, even more so than language, because language requires brain maturation and higher cognitive function. It uses actually a completely different part of the brain. So the first thing I tell people who are like, oh, I can't draw. It's like, yeah, actually you're kind of hardwired to draw. You're hardwired to visualize things. And it may have been trained out of us, and that's totally fine. But let's go back to the basics. Yes. And so then we run a little basic course in drawing, and people learn how, remember how to draw a circle, a square, a rectangle, and lines or arrows. Yeah. And like, okay, that's your alphabet. Like that's all you need. And so let's start combining these things. So when we combine 3 circles, it's a snowman. And when we combine a square and a triangle, it becomes a house. And you start remembering very quickly as an adult, especially if it's in a no risk kind of situation. And so building a very simple, your top 10 icons that you can draw, any leader can pick up a flip chart or actually, in these times, craft even on a piece of paper where, I'm like holding it up to the screen, can craft a visual that can help people organize mentally around really complex elements. And that's what I found in all the brain research is that because visuals help make meaning, we can recognize different patterns and they tell us different things about our business.
Yeah, I think so. I actually know exactly what you're talking about in this of teaching the basics, because Stanford has an incredible design school and I've taken a few classes, and in one class we actually learned about like the easiest way to draw like a crowd of people, just like 3 circles and then like triangles underneath, and that's it. And so I think that's definitely, there's such an easy way, and there's almost this perception where it's like daunting. It's like, no, I can't draw. But like when I think what you said, like when you just teach these basics and you have the foundation, then it's fairly easy. So I think that's great. So I am wondering, I love talking to my guests about goal setting actually, and just really like planning out a year from now, 5 years from now. And so I'd love to get an insight into your method of goal setting. And I imagine it's very, very visual, and almost, I think a lot of people are more so like numbers and just purely sentences. So I want to kind of hear the differences, and if you do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a very simple business process called gap analysis that a lot of consultancies, when they go in and they first try and assess like what is the problem we're trying to solve for. In the design thinking model, you have to understand your context. So what's the world that we're working in, and content? Okay, what are all the things that we're working with? So we start with your current state. So what is happening today? If I were to come into your organization or come into your startup, where do people meet? How do they talk? What do they talk about? What do your meetings look like? So some of that stuff is Tim Brown and IDEO, really like doing a very deep assessment of what's happening now. And then saying, okay, so if these are all the things that are happening now, and what are those things that are really working for you and the things that really aren't serving you? And a lot of that gets into what's our mission, what's our purpose, how are we behaving in such a way that's helping us move into the future? And so as you get into that conversation, you have to get some clarity about where you want to go.
So that's not the goal setting, but that is like building an idea. I call it like a future pull. Where is the future pulling me? Why is it pulling me there? And being able to visualize that, because just like with sports and athletes, if you can visualize yourself living into that future, then it becomes much easier to say no to some things and yes to other things that help you move into that future.
Yeah.
And so that's the real goal setting. Okay, here's my current, here's my future, here's this big gap in the middle. What are some goals, usually 3, that you want to achieve in the next 6 to 18 months that can help you get closer to that future you want to see yourself in? Yeah. And so the thing that's so fun about this approach is that it still requires that analytical brain, because I need to, on the analytical side, I really need to understand the components of my future or my current that are going to help me get to my future. Yeah. And if you will, the right brain is unleashed to be able to connect the dots in how you get there. And so people say, oh, I'm not artistic. Oh, I'm not that creative. Actually, your brain is. You just haven't used that muscle in a while. And so this simple gap analysis helps any business leader like quickly identify, what are we doing? What should we be doing? How do we close the gap?
Yeah, I love it. I think that's very important. And I think I've never heard the future pull almost, and like really imagine your future and then be like, okay, let me consider both of them and be like, okay, these are the steps to get to that. I think that's very valuable. Yeah. So obviously with coronavirus happening right now, everything's remote, and you really start to think about, okay, the current moment, but also what does the future of work look like? Will companies have already said, okay, we're going fully remote? And who knows, even post-coronavirus, like maybe it'll continue to be remote. I want to know how that's impacted your work and visualization and using these visual tools, because it does seem like it's much easier in person rather than doing it over Zoom. But I don't know, what challenges have you run into, and how have you innovated as a company to be like, okay, this is how we can still pursue this while all being remote?
Right. So our strongest value proposition and why customers come to us is the combination of visuals and really good facilitation. So when those things come together, that's really when a business plan or a strategy can be accelerated. It's like a really good design and then good facilitation. So yes, there is so much that happens live and in person that we're not experiencing right now. Yeah. So one of the things we've done is we're using the concept of design sprints in planning and organizational development that we're doing with people. So we hold 2-hour design sprints, maybe one every other day or once a week, or sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, to be able to get through some of the content. The benefit of that approach is it allows it to sink in to the people, versus before we would come in and do 1 day or maybe 2 days at a time, then step away, and 2 days at a time, step away. Here we are doing, these different sprints that allow people to go deep for a short period of time. So frequently people are like, oh my God, those 2 hours, they went by like that, because we can get really focused. One of the challenges that technology has presented is that we're losing our ability to focus. So this is a nice shift on that continuum. But we still are doing the visuals. So I'm going to turn my computer just a little bit, but you can see I have a studio where I have a place where I can draw. A lot of my colleagues are going digital. There's lots of online digital tools to be able to use to be able to still produce a high impact visual that you can then turn around to your client. And with this incremental design sprint approach, you can see the map incrementally come alive. Yeah. So it's still your content, and we're still having good, juicy conversations. We're just not able to do it in person.
Yeah, I think that's great. I also think it's important. I think what that also teaches us is the idea where when you have these constraints, it forces you to be innovative, and it forces you to really come up with new ways it's like starting any company. It's almost better to have constraints and bootstrap and whatever else it may be, but then you can really be creative about growing. So I think that's great. So another question I have is, tell me a little bit about your book. What made you put it into writing? And has this been like a project that you've always wanted to do, or what's the main reason behind it?
The main reason behind the book is I got an invitation to write a book. I mean, this is like a very unusual book story. Like, this doesn't happen every day. I know that. So anybody listening to this, just know if you hold an intention around a book, you can find ways to make it happen much more quickly than you think. You, again, just have to have a lot of hustle, a lot of side hustles to do that. So actually, I was at a conference, and there was somebody from McGraw-Hill who saw my work. We were doing a bunch of design thinking sprints during the conference. And they said, would anybody on your team be interested in writing a book about this? And I was like, well, I have a lot to say about it.
And so the book came together in a very short period of time of about 9 months. It's published by McGraw-Hill Business. Initially, I have to say, I thought maybe I had about 100 pages in me, and I didn't realize I had as much to say about the topic area as I did. But what the book really provided me, it was an opportunity to kind of bring together 4 dimensions of what I think make for really powerful visuals and business strategy. The first dimension is this aspect I mentioned earlier about the globalization of work, and that when you're working with teams from all over the world, a visual can say so much more and pull people in versus alienating people, right? The second thing is that all the research around how people learn in brain science. I am a former science educator, and so I really geeked out on the science of the brain and cognitive and brain development, and the crucial role that visuals can play in doing that. The third dimension is just that we're living in unprecedented times really right now, but we were there before. So our context, our global context, our environmental context, when you look at the context of the world right now, relative to the things that we're experiencing, we've never quite been here before. And so because of that, we need new ways to imagine and literally picture our world. And then the last part is, how do I get a plan? Okay, so that's all fine. Brain science, pictures, imagining, but it's got to be sticky. It's got to be something that, happens live and in person, and something I can really work with. And that's how the construct of the book came together.
I love it. I think that's great. So, okay, Chris, before we get to some fun questions, I do want to just dive a little bit deeper into, clearly throughout your career, you've had this almost a gene to hustle, and you know how to hustle and what it takes. And I think that's, as you said, it's more important now than ever to be able to have that ability to hustle and not get down when you don't get your dream job, and really just go with what opportunities arise. So I want to know, what tips do you have to almost stay motivated and keep yourself still hustling, even though you could continue to get no's? And like, even in entrepreneurship, it's very common to get rejection very often. So what advice do you have to almost deal with that rejection?
So let's start with rejection, so that, if it's like I submit 20 proposals in a month, I know maybe one will get funded. So you have to have a pretty thick skin when it comes to your product and your process. So I say to people, don't get too attached to your own outcome, because it actually doesn't serve you. So if you're too attached, then it means you already have an idea about the direction that you're headed and what that possible outcome might be, and that may not jive with the customer. So the second thing is, talk to your customers. Talk to the people. So like you're doing with this amazing webinar podcast, if you say, okay, I want to be inspired, and I want to learn from people who know more than I do, then don't be afraid to actually pursue it and test it. So it's not just test it with your customers, test it with the people that you're most excited to talk to. I think that this is one of the best platforms, and right now is the best time to reach out to people you've always wanted to talk to and say, oh, I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to interview them. So I think you have to be able to test those ideas, talk to your customers, and just keep moving forward. I think you brought up mentors earlier, but I think it's super important right now to be surrounded by people who get you and who are not afraid to push you. So that get you is so that I have some place to go and lick my wounds when I get rejected.
Yeah.
Push you are those people that are like, so what's next? And that, that is really, sometimes that's really hard to hear. But I think having those people who really have your interest, your best interest, and I think especially as women, we typically undersell ourselves, and we take too much on, like, oh my gosh, what was wrong with me? Instead of looking at the marketplace and saying, is this the right product for the right time for the right client? Maybe not.
Yes, it's so true. And I've had this conversation with many of my guests on the show just about almost the mentality aspect of being a woman and kind of projecting, like, it's almost, you have to find that confidence in yourself before you project it onto others. Like when you have that self-doubt, it's almost, that's what you're projecting. So have you found that you really need to like hype yourself up? And I think that's like, I think you said it already, like that's a really important lesson, but do you have anything more to say about being a woman in this space?
Yeah, I think every woman should go to a sales training, regardless of whether you're in sales or not. And here's part of my, this is a good story for inspiration is, I was very resistant. I thought, hey, my business is pretty good. I don't need sales training. This is a lot of money. I don't want to take it. And I went through the sales training. It was an awesome person. She lives up in Boulder, and it was a 2.5-day program. And I was right at a point where I was renegotiating a retainer with a very prestigious institution in the U.S. To continue some strategic planning for them. Okay. And based on her advice and the sales process, I applied that sales process. I increased my overall retainer by $40,000 within 1 week. And I was like, and the customer didn't even push back when I asked for more money. So I realized through the sales process that I left money on the table.
Wow.
So it helped empower me to ask for what I thought I was worth. It helped me evaluate what do I actually think I'm worth. And then it pushed me to actually ask for more money. Yeah. And so I think every woman could totally benefit from good sales training, regardless of what your role is. It just is such an eye-opener about how to advocate for yourself.
That's very, very interesting. I'll take that into consideration.
Do it.
I actually talked to Sylvia Acevedo, CEO of Girl Scouts, incredible woman. And in my episode with her, she teaches one of like her core, I guess, values in life is she only accepts 3 no's before she walks away. Like she needs 3 no's before being like, okay, fine. But I think, and then she also says the first sale you have to make is to yourself. Like you have to be able to be confident in yourself before you can go try to get something else. So I think that's a really good insight, and I'm gonna do it too. So I think that's great. Okay, Chris, as a final 2 questions, I want to know, what is a passion or hobby that you have that's just unrelated to your work?
Right now, gardening.
Oh, cool.
I can't get my head out of it. Like I have so many weeds right now, and I'm thinking, plotting and planning about how to get rid of them.
But you like the actual act of it and just doing it.
I love it. Yeah, I just haven't harvested all my radishes.
Wow.
Lettuce is like almost done for the season. I'm planting carrots and beets, and yes, I love it.
That's very cool. And then as a final question, I ask all my guests, what is a fun or weird talent that you have that no one else really knows about? So I'm going to go first. So I do blueberry throwing and catching. So here we go.
Okay, wow,
okay,
cool.
All right, let's see. There we go.
Wow, yes!
I've been practicing for years. It's now ingrained in me, this talent.
That's so good. I love it. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I think, I learned this actually from one of the younger people that worked for me a couple of years ago, is that, and this is not unique to me, but it kind of fits with the whole, with our whole conversation, is just that, when you have a sense of humor, you should really share it. And that was what her, as she was doing an exit interview, she was like, "You're so funny and the world doesn't see it." And I'm like, So that's not really a hidden talent, but it is a hidden talent for me that I think because I just want to be so professional that, the world doesn't really see the funny side of me.
And I think I actually recently took a class this past quarter, and it's called Humor in Serious Business. And I love it. It's in the Stanford Business School, and it's one of my favorite classes, and it's literally about how do you incorporate levity into your life, into leading a company, and it's the importance of doing that, because I think it's important in all regards, culture, just employee motivation in so many ways. So I love that. I think that's definitely a talent. For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've loved talking to you, getting to know you better. I appreciate it. So thank you so much.